Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I can be heard.
You're loud and clear, can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Karanja. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this webinar. This is the fourth in the College of Agriculture and Vet Sciences, and it is the second high-level webinar that Wangari Maathai Institute is hosting. And so on behalf of the staff and students at the Institute, I welcome you all. I want to thank our key speaker, Professor Kiama, our Vice-Chancellor. I also want to thank our three discussants, Professor Karanja Njoroge, Professor Wahome, and Mrs. Marion Kamau. I hope she is in the meeting by now. I also would like to thank all the participants, people who have been able to join us this afternoon. We look forward to a very enriching and participatory discussion after the main speaker has delivered his presentation. Now, the way the webinar is organized is such that we shall have some opening remarks by the college principal, Professor Mikal, who will introduce the speaker and the three panelists. After that short, those few opening remarks and brief introductions, the guest speaker, Professor Kiama, will then deliver his webinar. And that will be followed by discussions by the panelists, starting with Marion Kamau, then Professor Wahome, and then Professor Njoroge. After that, we shall have a Q&A session, about 20 minutes, and we shall end up our webinar with a vote of thanks towards the end. I would now like to request our principal, Professor Rose Mikal. I hope she has been able to join to make a few remarks and also introduce the speaker and the three panelists. Principal.
Thank you very much, Professor Mungai, to our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Kiama, our invited guests, our panelists, Madam Marion Kamau, Professor Wahome, and Professor Karanja Njoroge. I'm privileged to take this opportunity to welcome you to our fourth in the series of our UON at 50 webinar series. It gives me great pleasure that we are reflecting on Professor Wangari Maathai's life and works today. I have a lot to learn from this as an individual and as a representative of the institution. Because time is not on our side, may I take this opportunity to welcome a bit more or introduce our speakers, starting with the Vice-Chancellor. Professor Stephen Kiama is the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Nairobi since January 2020. He is a veterinary surgeon by profession. Professor Kiama has served as chairman of the Department of Veterinary Anatomy and Physiology, as Associate Dean, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, as Acting Dean, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, and the founder, director of Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies. As principal of the College of Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences, and as Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Human Resource Administration, before becoming our current Vice-Chancellor. So we have, he has a wealth of experience, which we are privileged to share. Professor Kiama has had a key role in institutional building at the University of Nairobi and in other institutions. Outside the university, he has been a member of the national and international committees and initiatives such as the Clinton Global Initiative, Professor Kiama has attracted substantial research equipment and training funds for the university. And he is a member of professional societies such as the University of Nairobi Alumni Association, the Kenya National Academy of Sciences, Kenya Veterinary Association, and Kenya Society of Neuroscientists, among others. Professor Kiama worked closely with the late Professor Wangari Maathai in conceptualizing the development of the Wangari Maathai Institute. Others involved in developing the idea of establishing the institute include Professors Ger, Mbaya, Mwangombe, Karanja, Akundabweni, Kinuthia, Mande, Dr. Mushemi, and Mrs. Njehu, among others. Now, working closely with the VC, Professor George Magoha at the time, and then Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Peter Mbithi at the time, he led in development of the proposal to establish the institute, which was approved by the University Senate on 11th June 2009, and the University Council on 16th June 2009. As chairman of Wangari Maathai Institute Board, he led in the development of Wangari Maathai Institute's vision and strategic plan, recruitment of faculty, starting of its graduate programs, designing of institute, sourcing of funding, and guiding in its construction. We look forward to hear from our key speaker today about the reflections of the late Professor Wangari Maathai and successful journey to establish a center of excellence in environmental governance and what he expects of the Institute in the next 50 years. As we are celebrating the past 50 years now, the reflections are for us to carry forward to the next 50 years. May I then take the privilege again to introduce Madam Marion Wakanyi Kamau. Marion Wakanyi Kamau is a retired principal and chair of the Greenbelt movement. She has been a member of the movement for many years. She heads the board of directors and provides strategic leadership to the organization executive, GBM International liaison offices in the US and UK, and GBM Secretariat in Kenya. Marion plays a pivotal role in perpetuating the legacy of the Greenbelt movement founder, Professor Wangari Maathai, who is a 2004 Nobel Peace Prize Peace Laureate, through the newly established nodes to promote her academic research exploits via the Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies, and her vision and values via the Wangari Maathai Foundation. She is the coordinator of Grannies in Distress project, which focuses on the families in the slum areas which have lost parental care and after the loss of parental care due to HIV/AIDS pandemic. She serves as the chairperson of the Nairobi County Trefoil Guild branch of the Kenya Girl Guides Association. She also facilitates the rehabilitation of street girls project in conjunction with the grassroots women community leaders, and the project enables the girls access training in entrepreneurship and leadership to successfully manage sustainable income generating activities. Through community projects and faith-based organizations, she is involved in cultural and environmental values which are celebrated to promote family values which strengthen peace building and promote national cohesion. Indeed, we are privileged to have Madam Marion with us today. Professor Raphael Wahome was trained in histology by Professor Wangari Maathai when he was a first-year veterinary student. He later, through the association with the VC, Professor Kiama, met her during the formative stages of Wangari Maathai Institute and participated in the workshops that developed the philosophy and strategy that guides the Wangari Maathai Institute. through his office as the Strapper coordinator in link between the University of Nairobi and the Faculty of Life Sciences, University of Copenhagen, Denmark. He was instrumental in arranging a visit for Professor Maathai to Copenhagen, where she was honored and where she also invited participation of the University of Copenhagen in the formation of the Wangari Maathai Institute. In partnership with the Danish team, Professor Wahome, together with Dr. Thenya, led the University of Nairobi team in writing and implementing the first multidisciplinary project at the Wangari Maathai Institute, which is codenamed Stake Project. He also was a core member of the team that developed the Wangari Maathai Institute PhD and MSc programs in environmental governance and management. During the pioneering years, he organized the teaching of these programs and the widely acclaimed field training program. Until last year, he was a Wangari Maathai Institute board member representing the University of Nairobi Senate. We are indeed privileged to have Professor Raphael Wahome as one of our speakers today. Professor Karanja Njoroge is currently an independent consultant on sustainable development management. He is the chair of the Center of Environmental Action, which supports sustainable livelihoods and wise use of natural resources. Professor Karanja worked closely with the late Professor Wangari Maathai for many years, serving as the executive director of the Greenbelt movement. He was involved in the pioneer efforts to establish the Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies at the University of Nairobi. He was a member of a committee comprising of members from the Greenbelt movement and University of Nairobi faculty, which played significant role in concretizing the idea of the Wangari Maathai Institute. He was also involved at the Wangari Maathai Institute with partnership program with the University of Copenhagen, stabilizing Kenya by reducing forest-related conflicts, that is stake also, that trained 4 PhD students and 15 master's students studying aspects of natural resource management, particularly forest-related conflicts in the Mau Forest Complex. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to learn from our colleagues who have a wealth of experience in this area, and they have a lot to tell us about Wangari Maathai Institute and her vision, and indeed what is out for us to contribute also to the society, because we are not just here to listen and then go home, but what is it that we will carry from here to take home and to pass down to the students we teach, to the next generation and beyond. So thank you very much everyone for coming. Welcome, Professor Kiama. I know how you hold the Institute close to your heart. Welcome, address us.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nikal, for that elaborate introduction. I want to acknowledge Professor Mongai also, the director of the Institute, as well as the panelists. You can see Professor Karanja, Professor Wahome, who I worked with quite a bit to get the Institute together. And they provided their time, their energy, their intellect to ensure that we got where we did. I haven't seen in the images Marion Kamau, but you mentioned her, so I believe that perhaps she has also joined as well. And I also worked with her from the beginning when Wangari was guiding us into getting this dream to be true. Now, I am just going to actually just give my reflections on Professor Wangari Maathai and just contextualize it in terms of the Wangari Maathai Institute. And I have just this first slide here of her smiling, just with that quote from her, that when we plant trees, we plant the seeds of peace and hope. And I remember many times when I went to read as Director of Wangari Maathai Institute tree planting, I always emphasize on this, that the trees, when you plant them, then the birds are able to perch there, build their nests, breed in that place of safety. And therefore there is hope of a new generation coming in. And even under that tree, there are the insects and the other life forms that continue to enjoy that tree that you plant. And therefore you plant the seeds of peace and hope. Now, as I share on my reflections of Professor Wangari Maathai, what comes to mind was her ability to see the outcome of whatever she chose to do, to have an image of what is it that she wants to do. She had developed that very, very deeply. Many of you who write projects, especially development projects, I know Professor Wahome does many of these, and Professor Karanja and Ika, as well as others who are here. The development project, they always want to know what is the outcome of what is it, or of this project that you want to do. And that is actually, in my view, as I reflect on her, where she had developed the most, to see the outcome. And because she could see the outcome, she was able, therefore, to get other people to work with her and even to risk with her, particularly because she was also able not only to see, but also to share that image with others. She walked and spent time with others to be able to share that image with her, to be able to see it. And some of you who are involved either in Uhuru Park or in Karura or in the release of the political prisoners, you know how, or even protecting public spaces, you know how many of those people she worked with could even risk their own lives. In Karura, on the release of the political prisoners. Yes, they could risk their own lives. And they risked their own lives because she had managed to share that final image, that outcome with them, and nothing would stand between them and getting that. Like the women she worked with in releasing, having their sons released from detention. The women could see their sons enjoying freedom like other Kenyans. And they were ready to face the police, even with the bullets. And the batons, police beating them up. And in some cases, they even removed their clothes to just show their disgust with what the police were doing, because the police were coming to stop them from that outcome, from that image, from that results, which was so clear to them that their sons are going to be released and that they are going to walk with their sons in freedom. She was excellent in that. Seeing the outcome, seeing the image, and being able to share that with anyone. I spent many hours with her. She called me for meetings in her house, outside in her office to discuss, and so that she can share that outcome, that image of the Wangari Maathai Institute with me. And as a result, it was now therefore not very difficult, even as she left us so abruptly, that I was able now to carry forward and to ensure that the institute was realized, because I had also seen the image of that institute. I had seen the students working there. I had seen the faculty. I had seen others experiencing the institute and going out there to serve and to become the seeds of hope and peace. That was her gift. As we reflect on her, on Professor Wangari Maathai, the ability to see the outcome, the ability to see the end, the ability to share that image, and therefore to get all other people converted and to work with her for that. As I was trying to think about this matter, what was the root of her being able to develop that ability to see the end? And I go back to when she did her project back in the University of Pittsburgh in the United States of America, where she did her master's. At that time, she was known by other students as well as her faculty as Miss Wangari Mary Josephine Muta. Very fancy name, 2 English names, Mary Josephine. I think later she has written in her book, she dropped some, because some people now will drop the names and they begin to call her Miss Wangari or Mrs. Wangari. And she dropped like that, and they started calling now Wangari Muta. But and she wrote her thesis, her MSc thesis in Pittsburgh. I just got this reference in Google. And you see it is written Muta WMJ. And she did her work on development of development and cytological study of the pineal body of the Kutunix quail in 1965. And I've given the image of the quail there. The pineal body is an organ you find in the brain, at the floor of the brain. And you find it in many animals. It is in all vertebrates. And it helps us to define the circadian rhythm. That is to be able to know day and night. So that if you haven't slept for so long, it releases some hormones called the melatonin. And they tell the body that the body now is fatigued, it's tired, it needs to rest. So it is our body clock. And she did her work on the development of this organ. The thing with the development, when you are studying development, you have the organ in the first, you have looked at it, and you want to go back to know how it came about. So she began there. You have the image, you have the structure, you have even the function of a fully formed pineal body. But now she wanted to know, where did it come from? And as we reflect on her, I find that that is one of the roots of her developing this skill of being able to know the outcome. She began by, she has the outcome, the pineal body, fully formed pineal body and its function, and now decided to unravel it slowly to the cellular level, to the cell level, and find out how did it come to be organized the way it is. After she finished her master's in Pittsburgh, she came to the University of Nairobi, and where she was employed at the Department of Fetal Anatomy. At that time, she decided to do a project And initially, she wanted to do a project again, still on the pineal body. But when she went to Munich in Germany, and with the discussion and prodding of Professor Peter Water, she found that this may not give her enough data to write a PhD thesis. And again, she changed her subject and again went back to another organ now, still on development. And she now worked on the early stages of embryonic development of the bovine gonad. And I put the image of the gonad there, the testis of the bull. In her mind, she says, now I still need to do development. But what do I work on? And together with Water, they said, let us work on the development of the testes. Again, fine-tuning her skill on development. She says, now, you know how the testes look like. But how does it come about? How does it come to be the way it is? How does it come to be placed where it is placed? How does it come? It is organized like that. We have various structures there, like we call the seminiferous tubules. How do they come to be? How do how are the sperms formed? And at what point are they released? So, but again, she is starting with what we know to coming from how does it come to be? And again, she is on the subject of development, thinking about change, to be that optimal structure, that optimal organ, that optimal body that does work the way it does it. Yeah. How do all the things come into play to ensure that that organ, like we can think of an organism like University of Nairobi or like a whole cow, how does it come to be to work the way it does? And there are various pieces that come to play. Even as a human being, when you walk, you run, there are so many parts of the body that are involved. How did those parts of the body come in place the way they are and to be well synchronized to perform the function that they do? So, and that is an important subject, even as we think about the development, and because later she began to talk about the concepts of sustainable development. And began to talk about, for sustainable development, you need good governance, you need peace, you need to take care of the environment. But she is again talking about development. Yeah. Because she had learned from that early development, intellectual development of her brain, that the concept of development is important. And the first thing is that you have to see the final image. And in this later concept, when she got the Nobel Peace Prize, what she came up with is now, how do we get sustainable development? To get it, you need good governance, you need good care of the environment, and you need peace. Again, for purpose of development, the pieces you need to ensure that development takes place. And that's why I say, again, she had to see, to have the testes perform the way it does, what are the pieces that come to place and at what point, so that it functions the way it functions in reproduction. So as we reflect about her, this is what as I reflect about, that's what I think about her. As she started thinking about very complex things that the world now recognize her, that is where she began in terms of thinking about the development of the pineal body and the development of the bovine testes, the gonads, and in stage 5 and 110 millimeter of what we call the CRL or crowd lump length. I had mentioned this, that she was hired on 1st of February 1966 in the University College of Nairobi, University of East Africa. At that time, the chairman of the Department of Anatomy and Histology, Department of Veterinary Anatomy and Histology, was Professor Reinhard Hoffman, who was the chairman of the department at the University of Nairobi. He's the one who hired her and also mentored her through her PhD, even as when she went to Munich and when she came back. And later on, she took over as chairman of the department years later. Now, again, when now she has left now the structure, the development of the structure, of the body structure, and she started thinking about other developments now, particularly on how to ensure that, that the community, the women, the people are developed, they change to a better status. And in this now is where she thought about what does she do? And it is when she came up with the concept of the Green Belt movement, which is started in 1977. And you see, the Green Belt movement is a grassroots non-governmental environmental organization that focuses on environmental conservation and development. And she does not leave the issue of development because that is her foundation in the university. How can she now ensure that the knowledge she has learned on how structure, the body structure, functions optimally? How is the body structure developed to function optimally? How now can she bring this knowledge to the social arena to ensure that the community, the people develop and that they are optimized and that they meet their objectives and they are happy? The most members of this group are women. And she, at that time, started with this slogan to build them because she needed them to see the image, like what I started to see before. Because with the concept of development, you need to have the organ that is performing optimally. But now when you come to the society, for development society, the people are not able to see the image of what they will become tomorrow. And you need to walk them. With the testes, you can show it. With the pin your body, you can dissect it and show it. But how do you show a developed society without, and it is a society in Tetu, it is a society in Muranga, it's a society in Kenya. How do the people in Madare or in any other place see that development before it has come to be? So she had to galvanize women, she had to galvanize them. And initially calling it is Save the Lad Harabe. So that's how finally she initially called it, Save the Lad Harabe, so that at least they see what they are doing is to save the land. At least they can see that one in the first instance. And then they were made to commit to this statement that being aware that Kenya is being threatened by expansion of desert-like conditions, that desertification comes as a result of misuse of the land and by consequent soil erosion, and that these actions result in drought, malnutrition, famine, and death, we resolve to save our land. They resolve to save the land, at least the land they can see. So now the thing is now to go back and see what are the activities they need to do to save the land that they can see. And so that she can begin them there in the concept or in this concept of development. And she has explained this in the book she wrote, Green Belt Movement, Sharing the Approach and the Experience. That losing topsoil should be considered as analogous to losing territory to an invading army. And indeed, if a country was so threatened, it would mobilize all available resources to protect this priceless commodity. And she again now brought the army and the schools. And this, initially the army was a bit reluctant. It's when she became the Assistant Minister for Environment, is when she managed to bring the army. And the army proceeded to do a lot of tree planting. I recall that one time she was at Karura, where she convened the military who had done good things in planting trees and awarded them. I recently, one of them showed me a certificate they received during this time. And that is important to ensure that people are able to see after they develop what is it, what is that image, what is going to happen, how will the community have changed. And this, you have to bring all the people together, everybody to contribute in their own way. The school-going children, the military, the working communities, to plant the trees, not for you to enjoy the shade immediately, but for the future generation. Because when we are talking about development, we are talking about change. And you have to contribute, the little you contribute when the organs are developing, like when we talked about the testes. You see one cell move in, a blood vessel come in to feed this, nutrients are brought in, another cell of another type come in, and finally you have the full testes that produces the sperms. Now, each of these plays different roles. This military, the school children, the women, everybody plays a role, and finally you see the forest. The people, only thing she brought to them is that this activity that you do will help to save the land. Just put that in your mind, it will help to save the land. But finally, you will be able to see, if you drive to some parts of this country, you see they are forested now. You see the areas of Muranga and the other areas with a lot of trees. But the concept you tell them, you want to save the land. People will be able to get firewood. People are able to get wood to plant, to build houses for their sons. But the simple message she gave them is, let us save our land. And through this, she taught them how to plant appropriate tree species, how to maintain vegetation cover. And as I say, the green belt was initially just to create weed breaks, the green belts to create weed breaks by digging terraces, protecting forests and catchment areas for indiscriminate exploitation. And in order to pass this outcome to the communities, she did a lot of training, because it's again connected to Wangari Maathai Institute. Because it is where she starts now thinking that how can this come to the university, to ensure that those who come to the university, the professors, the policy makers, the students, the visitors who come there, are trained, are converted to protect the land. So she did a lot of training. And one concept she kept on using for the training is what she was calling kujijua. You need to know yourself. Because when you know yourself, then you know why you are where you are. And she would give the concept of the wrong bus syndrome. You find yourself entering a bus, takes you to Nakuru, but you wanted to go to Machakos. How did you get to Nakuru? You need to reflect on this. And again, you have to unwind. In the same concept I said, she was working on the pineal body and the testes. You have to see, how did it come to be the testes? How did it come to be the pineal body? How did you find yourself in Nakuru and not Machakos? You have to Now unwind and find out where did the mistake take place, so that you correct it, and you get the outcome of the pineal body that is able to control the circadian rhythm. That you come out the person who is changed and the better and developed and able to address your problems. Don't blame the chief, don't blame the government, don't blame this. How do you unpackage where you find yourself? You find yourself in a certain status. How do you break this up to find out exactly how did you come to that? So that she trained people, given the concept that she had learned on development. How can you at any one time be reflecting about your abilities and how to exploit your abilities, and therefore why you are in the status you are now, and why it is not different? Why are you where you are now? Is it that possible that you could be elsewhere? And if you could be elsewhere, where did you go wrong? What is it that we can do? And in her book, Challenges for Africa, which is again a book about development in Africa, and it is mainly about the trying to reflect why is Africa the way it is now. Could we have been a better place? So she has written that book and she has elaborated various examples. And one of the examples she gives is when she had gone for a meeting in Yaoundé in Cameroon. And she says in that meeting, she was looking through the window and she could see some women working on a hillside. And she thought to herself, those people should not be working on such a steep hill because they are very quickly going to lose all that soil when it rains. And she was saying, when we do our work in high-level meetings, we are not making changes where they really matter. In this case, in the world where that farmer, the farmer of Yaoundé, places her blade in the soil. Because the farmer at that time, what she described in her book, is that the farmer used to build some small terraces, landing top down. And then the farmer in order would plant the seeds now in between the terraces, in between those tunnels, rather, that she was building, in between the small tunnels. The problem is that those tunnels, when the rain is heavy, they will become the channels of running water. And as water accumulates, they will build gullies and they will carry with them the soil. And once the soil goes, we have lost the land. She argues, how did we find ourselves there? Why are we not developed? In her book, if you can read it, it's called Challenges for Africa by Wangari Maathai. And this issue of development and the issue of finding out where we are now, as we reflect on this, she began to think about how can the universities contribute to changing the status of where we find ourselves today. And she began exploring. She had been out of the university for many years. She left in 1981 initially to go and contest as a member of parliament. And she put a lot of her time on the Green movement. But now she wanted to come back to the university. She was finding out how does she come back to the university. I'm told that initially she, and Professor Karanja can confirm this, she shared with Professor Karanja and asked Karanja, can you try to find out how we can get back to the university, to work in the university, to have the university come and help our people to save our land. And they initially approached the UNES then, the University of Nairobi Enterprises, and the University of Nairobi Enterprises then was engrossed in the learning module 2 programs. and then was asking about how does this thing make money. And Professor Karanja, I think at the time, I don't know whether he was not able, at least he made the efforts, but the unions could not see the connection. They were thinking of how to make money. They were not in that thing of how do you save our land. And then through all this, we later I had a meeting with her. At that time, Professor Peter Gear, who was mentioned earlier by Professor Yikal, visited the country. We went with him to Masai Mara, where we were giving a joint paper with Professor Peter Gear, Professor John Minor, and the other scholars in a big meeting that was organized there, and the meeting was dubbed From Molecules to Migration. And because in Masai Mara, you know, there is the animals there that does a lot of, there are many of them, they migrate in different seasons. And we were thinking about how do you start from the molecule to migration, again to do with the issue of development, the stages to develop to that level of migration. And we were presenting a paper on the biology of the dendritic cells, how the dendritic cells contribute to immunity. So after the meeting, Professor Gear then said, okay, we need to have a meeting with Professor Wangari Maathai. And I organized that meeting. Initially, she had offered us to go to her house, but later she said, why don't we meet in a hotel? And we met in the Mayfield Hotel in Upper Hill. And we had a very good discussion over a cup of coffee and some juice. You can see some coffee there and some juice. We enjoyed it. And they shared quite some good experiences with Peter Gear. Because Peter Gear, when he was doing his doctorate degree, he had been recommended by his mentor, Ewart Bible, to come to the University of Nairobi, where Wangari then was the chairman of the department. And Wangari helped him to access a lot of mammals from Nairobi National Park, then to study the lungs, how the lungs function. So they did very good work and they published a lot of papers with the Word Bible on this matter. And then Professor Gear kept contacts with Wangari since that time because of those foundations that Wangari gave him. At the very end of the meeting, and you can see now it is dark, the background there. At the end of the meeting, then I asked Professor Wangari, I would like you to come back to the university to mentor the young people. And it is at the same time she told me that she has been thinking about this matter of how to come back to the university. She had made the efforts and that it would be appropriate for us to organize a formal meeting where we can discuss and agree on what course or what activities, what action we could take for her to come back to the university. And then we organize a meeting to have next meeting at the Jacaranda Hotel in a week's time, when we now explored this idea further of forming the institute. And from the Jacaranda meeting, it was very clear that she needed to share her idea or her conceptualization of what the institute would look like. Remember from the beginning, when I was starting to talk about the reflections of Professor Wangari Maathai, I said she was very good in sharing the outcome. So she took us for a retreat in Elselmia. And you see the team that was there in that meeting. And she shared with us what the institute, what she would like to see. And we again now worked through to develop a paper, a proposal of that institute. And by the time we left the Elsevier in Naivasha, we had a document. Professor Karanja was the main facilitator of this meeting. By the time we came back to Nairobi, we had a paper to present to the Vice-Chancellor, then Professor George Magoha. And then I also shared the same with the DVC Administration and Finance then, Professor Peter Bidi. Professor Magoha, after a short time, was able to allocate us land, 50 acres, to put up the institute, where the institute is found now. Initially, we were allocated a piece of land elsewhere, and later we were allocated at where the institute is established. A quick overview of how the institute has developed. 2009, the institute was approved by Senate. In December, or in the same year, the institute was approved by council. In January of 2010, the director of the institute was appointed. In February 2010, Wangari Maathai was appointed as the distinguished chair of the institute. And in March 2010, we held the first inaugural meeting. Now, when we were thinking about the institute, we came up with various names. And I can quickly run over this. First, like when we had the meeting in Jakarta, the concept paper that Professor Karanja presented then, it was Wangari Maathai Empowerment Center, Leadership Training for Sustainable Development. But then, after our discussion in Naivasha, we changed it to Wangari Maathai Institute for Community Empowerment and Leadership, Wahome Cell. And then with the further discussion, we said that is too long. Then we called it Wangari Maathai Institute, Wahome. And if some of you recall, we called it Wahome for quite a while. And then Professor Wangari Maathai said, no. She has been working with the Japanese and she has visited many other countries. If you call something like this, it may turn out to be something. It may turn out to be something people like, or it may turn out to be something people do not like, Wahome, the name Wahome. Without finding out whether there are other communities which have a meaning for the name Wahome, we cannot call it Wahome. And we dropped Wahome. We started calling it WMI. I think there are still some people who interacted with us at the beginning who perhaps you say call it Wahome. But Wahome, we were cautioned by her. Because again, of seeing that picture, which other people are not able to see, she is able to see the final picture. It is in the Senate, when the institute was being approved in Senate, that the Senate recommended that having only WMI or Wangari Maathai Institute would not be adequate, because Wangari Maathai was known for her work on peace and the environment. And it will therefore be important to include those. And the Senate therefore approved that the name be Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies, which we abbreviate as WMI. The first board meeting, that is the team that came. And again, she was able to share her vision with the team, and we held quite good discussion on 9th of March 2010 on the inaugural board meeting. And you see there, Professor Karanja, we had our administrator, Jude Wabogo, is the one who is just next to Professor Karanja. Then there is this gentleman there, he had been sent to represent Wangari, or to represent the Institute of IDS, Institute of Development Studies. Then we had Professor Jenga Munene, who was the Dean of the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. Then Professor Kenovia, who was the Dean, Acting Dean, Faculty of Agriculture. And then Professor Derito, Professor Derito then had taken over as the Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, but Professor Kinodia, we had been working with him when he was acting Dean. So we still were inviting him for our meetings. And then the late Ben Waweru, who worked with us very, very closely as the academic registrar. As you may probably recall, Ben passed on last year. And he had worked very, very hard with the Institute. He never failed to come for any of our meetings. During this meeting, I recall that Professor Wangari asked us to sing this song. Again, because this is a dream, this is a vision which has come to reality. She had seen this image earlier. She had seen it coming, but she needed everybody else to walk with her to that level. And now it was a celebration for her. She was celebrating reaching there. And she therefore called on all of us to sing this song, the Amazing Grace.
How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious is that grace appear, there I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already become. It was grace that brought us thus far, and grace will lead me home. So we sang those three stanzas. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. It was grace that brought us thus far. And grace will lead us home. And grace will lead us home. It was clear to her. She had seen that image of the Institute at that time. And now it has come to be, holding that first board meeting. She had walked around in the college to see where we can cite the Institute. You can see some of the people who would work with us during this time. And Professor Karanja was always there. Now, the Institute has been and is in place, and many of you perhaps have visited and have seen the beautiful buildings, which it took a long time to walk us through, to share with the various teams that were designing, to show them the image, to share the image of that institute, how it should look like, and what outcome it should have. And the outcome is shown in this symbol of the tree, that it should be an institute where a lot of research is taking place and causing impact in the society. it should be an institute which should cause policy influence. She was very clear that that is the outcome. It should have global networks. It should have social engagement and outreach. It should offer experiential learning. That is the outcome. As I said, she was very good in seeing the end. And therefore now you begin to do your activities to reach there. And I hope that all those who continue to contribute to the Institute continue to see it in this light, that whatever activity you do, it should lead to policy influence. It should lead to social engagement and outreach. It should lead to more global network, because the global network will lead to hybridization. It will lead to multidisciplinary and holistic approach, and a new knowledge will be developed. Remember the concept of development, that communities will be changed, communities will be empowered, communities will be liberated. There will be peace, there will be hope for our people. And she has mentioned this in her book, Replenishing the Earth, spiritual values of healing the earth, that one aspect of the love of nature that we need to foster is experiential. Nature, and in particular the world, feeds our spirit, and a direct encounter with it is vital in helping us appreciate and care for it. For unless we see it, smell it, or touch it, we tend to forget it, and our souls wither. She hoped that the Institute will be an opportunity where you see nature, smell it, smell the flowers there, touch, and see and feel the environment, so that our souls will be rejuvenated, we will not wither, so that we can be able to protect the nature, and therefore we save the land. In the strategic plan, we also put this one: an inspiring, living, innovative, and creative laboratory, where new green technologies and best practices of environmental sustainability and conflict resolution can be fostered, developed, tested, validated, and demonstrated. That is the image of the Institute. That is the final outcome of what it should be doing. Professor Wangari Maathai, even as we reflect on her, even as I give my reflection on her, she was a scholar. She was a scholar. She wrote books, went for many meetings where she made presentations, scholarly presentations. She wrote her book, Green Movement, sharing the approach and the experience. And I have given a few of the quotes from that book. She wrote the book, The Challenges for Africa, which is about development. Why are we where we are now? And she wrote her book on Wangari Maathai and Bold, where she has given her own life story. And the last book she wrote, and many of you should read, because that book, she has written many paragraphs on how she sees the outcome, how she sees the Institute, how it will look like in the past. She talking about even her daughter Ruth, how she would like her daughter Ruth to come there and the experience. It is titled The Spiritual Values of Healing Ourselves and the World, Replenishing the Earth. Wangari Maathai was actually overall in the issue of development. She developed a party, which was called the Mazingira Party. And they even got one of the members of parliament, Silas Muriuki. Yeah. And beside the Green Belt movement, she was part of the NAC coalition government, and she has developed other things. Yeah. This was our last meeting, at least for conceptualizing the Institute, not conceptualizing the drawings, because the drawing of the Institute we continued beyond here. This was a meeting in Naivasha. You see Professor Karanja there. He has just, you can see his hand is seal soiled. He has just helped in planting that tree that Wangari planted there. And we had gone there for a retreat to finalize the strategic plan of how the mission, the vision of how the institute will look like. And we worked until very late, past midnight. And it is after this meeting, the following day, when everybody had left Naivasha, and we were just with her before I drove her back to Nairobi, that she shared with me that she wasn't well. And soon after, she visited the hospital, then was admitted in Nairobi hospital. After that, she was referred to better specialized treatment and went to New York for treatment. And then a year later, because this was August, a year later in November, she passed on. But at this time, all the people who are there were able to get the complete image of the institute, because the next time she was coming back was February of the following year, 2011, because this was 2010. And by that time, she had gone through treatment and she was in and out of hospital until she passed on. But during that time, from February to November, she spent again a lot of time with us, particularly to conceptualize the designs of the institute, to ensure that we can see the image so that we are able to put the pieces together of the institute. I don't know whether we are able to pray. No, if not, so I thought we can pray that, but that's fine. I think I'm coming to the end now of the presentation. So, well, as we reflect on Wangari, and you remember, she has also given the story of saving a forest, where she is talking about the birds and the animals which could not come and help the hummingbird to save the forest. Her contribution to this story is to argue, can we see a forest which is not on fire, a forest that is saved? What activities do we need to do? Everybody needs to do the little they can do to ensure that the forest is saved. And that is it with development. Remember, I started, as I reflected on her study of the pineal body, the study of the testes, where you start cell by cell before you get the pineal body, drop by drop to save the forest. That is my reflection on Wangari Maathai. Let us all contribute the little we can to ensure we have sustainable development. Let's see Wangari Maathai Institute to continue to contribute all the scholars that come there to ensure that there is sustainable development in our land, in Africa, and the rest of the world. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, VC. You certainly have sown a seed in all of us. There are many things that we never knew about the late Professor Wangari Maathai. And it is particularly exciting and interesting the way you have made the connection between her, professional work, studying, different organs of different animals and birds, and the connection that you have made with her thinking and the emphasis on the developmental aspects of organisms. Wangari Maathai Institute is an organism, and that her ability to see the end, I think that's a rare gift. But I can also say that I think you fall in that line. I'm not sure about the connection between vet anatomy and that ability to to think, things that way. So thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor. We will go to the next, to the panelists. And as I said at the beginning, we will there'll be a session on Q&A. But if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can wait and ask when that time comes. So it is now then my great pleasure to invite the first panelist, and this is none other then Mrs. Marion Kamau. Mrs. Kamau. Marion? Maybe I can come back to her. I'm not sure if she has any challenge with the network. So may I request the
I can see her now. She's there on the screen.
Oh, okay. Marion Kamau, kindly give us your thoughts.
We can't hear her. She's talking, but we cannot hear her.
Yeah, Marion, you are muted.
What is the problem?
Ah, there she is.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Marion. Unmute her.
Yes. I think you better go to another, but she need to exit and come back. She need to be advised here. Yes.
Okay. As we wait for her to get through to us, may I request Professor Raphael Wahome to give us his comments and reflections?
Thank you very much, Professor Mungai, for the invitation. I thank you, Vice-Chancellor. It's a very moving speech that you've made. You seem to have said it all. I will therefore not dwell very much on the driving spirit that created the Institute, because all the time you are working. I think there's some
Marion,
confusion. Prof, should I stop first and allow Marion to speak?
Marion, are you able to speak to us now? Hello? I think...
so I'll go on.
Just a moment. Marion, if you don't, let us have Professor Wahome finish, and then I'll ask you to come after him. So, Professor Wahome.
So I will continue. I was saying that the Vice-Chancellor has brought out almost a stepwise procedure in which the Institute was created, but he has also brought out the driving spirit that led to the creation of the Institute. I remember at one time at the Greenbelt Center in Langata, sitting with Professor Wangari. I think that's the last talk that I had with her. And unfortunately, I didn't know that she was unwell, but she was almost like a grandmother at that time, and I loved taunting her. And we were discussing an issue that has something to do with religion and the Africanization of religion, of the Christian religion as we know it. And we kept on pushing, and she would push back, and it's like it was a wrestling, only this was a verbal wrestling. And I thought that she would give up the argument because I was occasionally making very stupid remarks, but she wouldn't give up. She would push it all the way to the end until she could make me see her point. And this is, I think, what the Vice-Chancellor was talking about. I want to reflect a little bit on the development of our academic programs. We developed them after she was gone. So the only thing that we had to rely on was on our memory of what she said she thought the university should be in general, and specifically what the institute should do in transformation of the university and transformation of the communities. And I remember specifically that she had a philosophy on this, having had to work with fresh graduates in the Greenbelt movement. And she saw how challenged they were. They had the knowledge, but they had limitations in working with the people. She could not understand how people who are so well trained could not be able to work with real people. Her understanding was that the education we took people through in the university should be an education that enabled them to serve. And to serve people, you had to be equipped sufficiently to talk to people, listen to them, understand what their problems were, internalize those problems, provide expert knowledge to give the answers that they would appreciate. But this obviously was not happening. And so she had to go through a lot of retraining of the people that came to work with her, although they were graduates in the Greenbelt, to make them want to appreciate the people and also give them ability to interpret the understanding, the knowledge, the challenges that people at the grassroots had. I remembered this last week when we were discussing a potential project with some colleagues from Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization. And I was telling them that I have no challenge working with the people at the grassroots. And this I learned at the Wangari Maathai Institute, because before that time, I was up there and my head was in the air. It could never land to the problems that the people were dealing with. Now, Wangari Maathai had this philosophy that people should be able to deal with their own problems. The Vice-Chancellor alluded to that when he gave the example of the wrong bus syndrome. You should be able to understand yourself, and communities are able to understand their problems and why they have those problems. They also have alternative solutions to these problems. And it's only after we at the university listen to them, are able to come up with multidisciplinary solutions to these problems and facilitate the resolving of those problems. And when we were creating our academic programs, we had this in mind, and we tried as much as possible to internalize this philosophy. And I hope that it's still working even up to today in our coursework, in our team and group works, in the field work. It's evident in the reports and in the publications and thesis that we publish in the Institute. But the spirit was created long before the programs that were created. One thing that we wanted to do, which was very eager that should happen, was to have our students work with real life communities and work with them to identify the problem in a participatory manner that they thought was most pressing, outline or analyze the resources they had to which they could apply to resolve the challenge that they were having, and also how they could work together to improve their well-being without destroying the very resources that were necessary for their livelihood and was their own heritage and the heritage of their generations to come. So this had to be inbuilt into our programs. And we did this by placing in our 2 curricula a course which we called field training programs. And in this course, we wanted people to work for a time, 2 to 3 weeks, maybe up to 6 weeks within communities, and help and learn from the communities what were the boundaries of their communities, what were their interests, what were their challenges, and how they could convert those challenges to opportunities using available resources and skills which would be provided by our learners. Now, the field training programs were, of course, seriously challenged because they did not quite fit in within the structure of a graduate degree program within the university. And it was an uphill battle to push them through Senate. I would say that we appreciate the then director, now Vice-Chancellor, because Dr. Thenya and I had to push this curricula through the graduate school and sit in Senate and defend them. And he gave us support. And now we have produced a large number of graduates at master's level and at PhD level with skills to deal with people, which was the most important thing that was lacking. And in dealing with the people, we had to figure out ways of communicating, giving our students tools of communicating with pictures and illustrations and diagrams so that the members of the community could appreciate them. Of course, we missed Wangari in all this because if she had been there, she would have equipped us better with the skills that she had evolved over 4 decades of dealing with the people. It's almost like you were starting again, but we had with us Professor Karanja, who had worked for a long time with Wangari Maathai, and we were working also with the people from the Green Belt, especially in the field training programs. Wherever we went into the field, we found a Green Belt community there, and we worked together, and therefore we were able to actually communicate with the people at the grassroots. With this, I'd like to, of course, remember somebody like Charles Mwangi, who used to work with the Green Belt then, and was an instrumental even in the implementation of the project that assisted us in developing the programs, that is STAKE project. Now, in all this, it was not easy because we were trying to build leadership. One word that we used to use commonly was experiential learning. Experiential learning is not very different from what we as veterinarians go through while we are being trained, because we do a hands-on, very hands-on training in everything, starting from the cells that the Vice-Chancellor was talking about, all the way to the actual handling of healthy and unhealthy animals. But doing this with the people and being transformative, which was another word that Wangari left with us, making people transform themselves as agents for change to preserve their ecosystems. This was something that we did not have. And people having moral standards and moral vision for sustainability, these are things that we did not have and which had to be inbuilt into the curriculum. And this was a bit of a challenge. And talking to the people all the time, not looking down on them. In fact, I can remember that we used to talk to the people wherever they were in the streets, and we would be able to internalize everything that we had. I wanted to show this picture, which I hope you can see. It's a place in Narumoru, Nyeri, which was a terrible place because
Professor,
people settled there and they had almost no resources, but we would stand and talk to them and appreciate their problem and come up with solutions that they would buy in. They would have been credit, they could have been transport or firewood, they could have been how to manage livestock or construction of their new houses in the area, or even water. But in all these things, the most serious thing was to understand that it was a challenge to actually understand people and work with them. But we had the driving spirit, and in partnership with the people that were working from the University of Copenhagen, were able to actually push through the agenda of field training programs, whereby we would bring students from a variety of disciplines, and these would work together and create a scenario that is real life, because communities do not live in silos, they live a full life that incorporates everything that
Professor Wahome.
Yes, I'm finishing now. I'm just saying the final ones.
Okay.
So the final one is that this spirit is still driving us now in the institute as we graduate MSc and PhD graduates. And we hope that it carries on into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wahome. I forgot to tell you that you have 15 minutes at the beginning, but
yes.
Thank you so much for, thank you very much for that. It's very insightful. May I now request Madam Marion Kamau to give us her reflections on the late Professor Wangari Maathai. Yes, Marion. We can't hear you. I think yes.
You can hear me now.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Prof. I want to send you a message of goodwill and gratitude today that you celebrate the 50 years, and be with you in your spirit, in our spirit, as we remember our sister, our founder, Professor Wangari Maathai. This is a character that still today is amazing personality. To us, when you remember Wangari Maathai, we remember her for many, many things, particularly her love for the grassroots communities, which she founded and cherished because of the experience she had as she was growing up with her mother. She could remind us the feeling she had whenever she worked with her mother, with the soil, the cool soil, and she had a special experience, which she tried to pass it on to us and to the grassroots community. She would always remind us it is because of the way she grew up that she learned the lessons of women in particular, how difficult the life of women is, how they were not even able to have time to rest or even to attend meetings that were very necessary for them, like the meetings of their local administration. And therefore, because of that, they were left behind even in development. That she would drill it in until even ourselves today, we remember the importance of having the grassroots communities be empowered so that they can hold the life as it is. She had such gifts, we remember, that no one that worked across or around her environment and did not change. I particularly myself, I didn't know that I was very brave. And I remember when we went for advocacy to Uhuru Park, even Karura Forest, and sometimes we went even to Meru and even to Rift Valley. And even people, when they are wielding guns, they did not tell us we could die. We had that bravery that it was coming from herself with the activity that told us there's a bigger picture to look at, not yourself. We see like we are saving our nation or our country or our lives, and we became very strong. That will never leave my mind. Even if she came today and we had the same scenario, I will not hesitate. And that is a feeling that all those people who worked with Wangari Maathai at that time, they inherited that. The other thing that really comes very strong with us is the linkage between ourselves and the environment. Remember, she told us one time that nature is very unforgiving. And now we have seen it. It's very unforgiving. The same message she gave us, it is still keeps on ringing in our mind. And there are very many things that we do in our lives, but hardly do you remember somebody's story, even after 9 good years. With that spirit that we inherited from her is the one that drives us today to be mindful of those people who are at the bottom of the run, and be sure that whatever you are doing, you have put all your mind and your effort, and that you leave things better than what they are. And her connection with her own mother made us also feel that women, in whatever category they are important, and no way you can do without your mother, and also sharing with other people that are around you. Professor Wangari Maathai was so loving to the communities all over. She did not think about that he is talking about a Kikuyu. She saw human beings as they are. That is one thing that we cherish here at Greenbelt Movement, and we cannot afford to do otherwise. We don't see a Luo or we see a Kama. We see people that need to be helped, need to be developed for the betterment of everybody's life collectively. Sometimes we feel inadequate, but when we remember the work that were left for us and the responsibility that we have in our hands, we work and we are strengthened by what we learned from founder Wangari Maathai. And thank you very much, the Institute of Wangari Maathai, because we see what the mind of Wangari Maathai had stays with you. I remember very well when she started thinking about that institution of higher learning. She remembered to say that, we are doing a lot of work with the grassroots people. But if we do not have a higher mind that can make policies, can think better, higher, we shall one day lose every knowledge that we have had or every work. We need people. We need to come up with the people who can go to parliament and make policies. For us, when you are thinking about Wangari Maathai Institute, we are thinking of a way of preserving what the foundation of the Green Belt movement was. Then when we went to the army, and to make the army or the armed forces understand the linkage between peace and environment and why it's become. I remember again, it was easy for her to convince them that if we do not have peace with the people that they protect, the peace will be will not be there if people continue to lack such natural facilities like having good enough water or other chemical rivers or food for the animals. And that was a source, or still is a source, of conflict. So when she brought in that arm again, we started seeing it. We started seeing the connectivity between peace and environment. So Wangari was a person that was very special. She saw things in a bigger way, and she was able to connect what otherwise many people would not be able to connect. So for us in the Green Belt movement, when we remember the many things that we had, and how she was so influential in whatever activities she did, we feel very happy, and it's a memory that will live with us for a long, long time. There's a lot that we can say about Wangari Maathai, and I hope few you have a reason again to have a meeting like this one, and keep on remembering her, because the lessons we learned, if they are well passed to generations and generations to come, we will be able to make sure that our environment will serve us the right way forever. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kamau. You have made some very important statements, one of which is, and it strikes me very powerfully, that no guns could stop Professor Wangari Maathai. And I link this with what the VC told us earlier. Nobody could stop her because she knew the outcome. Then, of course, you have explained very well the connection between peace and wise, resource management. Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Marion Kamau. Now, it's my pleasure to invite the last panelist, Professor Karanja Njoroge. Professor Karanja Njoroge, the floor is yours. Professor Karanja. Is Professor Karanja still in the meeting?
Yes, he is. I think he got dropped, so I have just elevated him.
Okay, thank you.
Don't know. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh my, I don't know how I got dropped. Okay, how are you doing? Thank you very much, Professor Kiama. It was a moving and very encouraging testament of where we have come from with Wangari Maathai Institute and Professor Wangari Maathai. And it reminded me of many things that she stood for, worked for, and struggled with throughout the time that I worked with her. I don't want to take too much time because I think a lot has been said by the speakers. I really liked the analogy that was brought to me. I'm not a vet science, neither am I even a scientist of any kind, but I hear you when you say that she was really focused on thinking about change. And I know that everything she did it to achieve a change in the status of what she touched. And I know that she was a darling of the theory of practice. And I got to know her a long time ago when I was teaching in Canada, and she came to give a lecture. We had a series of lectures that we invited notable intellectuals and leaders to talk about our future. It was called Discovering Our Future. And I recall that during that presentation, she said she would not talk about the future because there is no future if we do not change. And so I resonate very much with what Professor Kiama alluded to in his presentation. Even in the work that we did at Greenbelt Movement, if a project did not achieve a change, she was really not interested in it. And I learned that from very early on when I got to know her and she wanted me to help in her work. She had just been nominated for the Nobel Prize, and we started working with her. She was frustrated by two things. One was a society that had lost its cultural knowledge. And she said, any other knowledge you achieve when you have lost your cultural knowledge is just a book, which you can discard and it has no effect on you. And therefore, she felt that our education system has to be transformative in order to change us from the manner in which we were changed by the colonial educations to a new realization that we are ourselves the change agents for our future. And there is nothing that can help me explain to you how deeply she felt about change. It was not just about changing political leaders or changing the way we do something, but it was transforming the way we think about what we need to do in order to secure our future. I really resonated with it, and I think she's the reason why I'm still working in the environment, because I was never trained in the environment. My work has always been in sustainable development and comparative development studies, but she's the reason why I work in many areas of environment, including conservation and protection of our natural resources. When we went to Karura in January of 1998, or 1999, I can't remember, and her effort was just to plant a tree, but to make a statement that Karura would not be dished out to people, to contractors and real estate developers, and that we were going to secure the future of Karura. Maybe I did not understand that at that time. But later on, much later on, in 2002, after she was elected member of parliament, that's when I realized that what she stood for would become real, because she just got appointed as an assistant minister, and we got talking. And one of the few things she told me was that we must transform our forest landscapes from being managed command and control system of those people who thought they knew about forests and keeping away our communities away from the forest, make the communities the guardians of forests. And I didn't quite understand what she meant by that, But after the Kenya Forest Act came into being, it had a clause or an Article 42, which enabled communities to participate in forest management in what I would call social forestry, where the community gains by being involved in the management of the forest. And I have been chair from the time she was alive of the Friends of Karura Forest. Karura Forest was really a no-go zone for anyone who would wish to keep their life and their body together. If you go into the forest, you're not too sure that you'll be able to get out of that forest because it was a den of thieves. And anybody who was hijacked on Kiambu Road or Limuru Road will end up being in Karura. I think it was made like that by the status quo or the government in place at that time, because when neighbors and the society and the communities feel discouraged about a landscape like Karura Forest, they would clap and ululate and support the government if they dished it out to developers. That was the idea. Prof proved them wrong. And we created the first CFA for Karura Forest in 2009. And by March of 2010, the forest was under the control of a group of community members. To this day, 10 years, 11 years later, the forest is now a sought out place. It is, like she said herself, the lungs of Nairobi City. And I am so proud of the work she did with us. I'm so proud of where she has taken us. And for me, as her disciple, I live praising the fact that she allowed me space to learn from her. Professor Kiama mentioned about our various meetings. And I can tell you that the first meeting that really made me really look for Kiama was a meeting we had somewhere in Chapel, North Carolina, and the university there wanted to enlist her to give all the books that she's written and all her works as a display in their place there. And when we got back to our hotel, I said, that's not a very good idea, Prof. And she said, yes, it's not a good idea, but I have been also asked by Yale University and by another university. And I said, even for Yale, it's a bad idea. And I kept talking about that until we came back and we met with Dr. Kiama, and the rest is history. I want to thank all of you who are now in charge of the Wangari Maathai Institute of Peace and Environmental Studies at the University of Nairobi, and ask you to remember that one of the reasons she wanted an institute was to be able to take the knowledge from the university and take it back to the community where all those intellectuals come from, and that knowledge becomes the change that the communities need. So as we look forward in the development of the Institute, let us look at the mechanics or the mechanisms that the Institute will use to not just do research, not just train and educate scholars, but be able to take that knowledge to the community out there, and that they can use it. Extension services have to come back, I think, and the idea of sharing knowledge, even with those who can't read a book. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Karanja. I think we shall forever be grateful to the speakers of this afternoon's webinar, starting with the Vice-Chancellor. You did a splendid job. I hope most of our staff and students are in the seminar, because you have heard it from the horse's mouth. Now, I may request Mr. Owino to unmute everybody. It is a Q&A time. And so anybody who has a question to Professor Kiama, to Marion Kamau, to Professor Wahome, to Professor Karanja, this is the time. Thank you.
Prof, so that there could be some bit of order, I would request that they raise their hands, and then now we can call in the name. Thank you.
Okay, that's in order. Dr. Mwanzia, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Professor, even for the opportunity. And thank you to all the speakers for the moving speeches. Now, my question is to my Vice-Chancellor, Professor Kiama. First, thank you for the presentation. And I'm asking, to what extent is a dream and aspirations of the late Professor Wangari Maathai being realized at such a time when we have emerging and reemerging infectious conditions, just like the recently reported COVID-19? It's a time when we are experiencing desertification, droughts, global warming, community conflicts, and even human and animal conflicts. That's the first question. My second question, again, to my Vice-Chancellor, Professor Kiama, is that he has really related development, peace and environment to the development of land, soil conservation, and so forth. But what about the relationship between peace and other aspects of development? For example, political development, even in our country, and even empowerment of our own people. My third question to the same speaker. I'm just requesting that Professor Kiama, you relate the theoretical foundations of development to peace and environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nguta. Vice-Chancellor, I don't know whether you want to tackle that, or if there are a few other 2 or 3, you tackle them together. Good. So any other question? Maybe, Vice-Chancellor, you can answer that as we wait for more questions. Vice-Chancellor.
So thank you, Director. And thank you, Dr. Nguta, for your very deep and informative questions. 3 of them. The first one on to what extent the dreams of Professor Wangari Maathai have been realized. I think, in my view, I don't know whether that is in a proportion or what. I think what I would say is that the realization is very low. We haven't done very well. And you have mentioned all the things of whether it is certification, whether locusts, whether the COVID. And I think to some extent, when she was coming to the university, because she shared with me her concern, she said she has worked out there in the Green movement. She has worked in various communities, worked with the UN. And she said that she has come to realization that if the things she has been working on are going to be realized, it will be good for the universities, the institutions of higher learning to take up the matter, because she could see that in the university, we have opportunities for receiving a lot of students every year. We receive scholars from out of Kenya and the scholars that are also here, that if those now interact, that we have a hope, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity that those students, when they come to the university, and after they complete, they have been inculcated with those ideas of saving the land, that when they go out, there will be those seeds of hope and peace out there. So that's how she looked at it, and that is the reason why the institute, the Wangari Maathai Institute, was formed, hoping that the people who come to the institute will be converted, and that the institute influence will not be to only those students who register in the institute, but even to the other students in the entire university, that when they, by the time they leave the university, they have had that experience that is transforming, that they can go and take out there. It is my hope that the institute will continue to play that role. It is a long walk. It is going to take us time, but if we remain on course and we remain focused to the image of realizing that image of saving our land, then, and all of us put or play different roles, however small role you play, then cumulatively, we are going to have this realized. We are on this march, Dr. Guta. We haven't realized, but I see that there is a hope so long as all of us and the institute continue to give that leadership that she expected that it will do. The issue of peace and the political development, obviously, this is an area that we have to continue working together because it is related also to the issue of good governance. We know that we have had challenges in our political leadership, not being able to be able to create that picture of the outcome they want, and not being able to sell or get people to move because they have not seen the picture themselves. Therefore, they cannot get the people somewhere. We have that challenge. We have had that challenge, and that's why she's talking about also the challenges of development in Africa. It is actually, to a large extent, it is to do with the leadership. And you have a situation where the government operates like a layer on top of the society. And it is not embedded, it does not penetrate the society. And the society talks about them, Father's Earths. And we only see opportunity of relating with the government as an opportunity to get a job, to be appointed in a board, to get more members of parliament, to be given more chances of becoming a member of parliament when more positions are opened. So the government has taken that role of looking like they are the ones who offer things to people, and that people are the consumers of what the government offers. So the government is not one person or one whole together with the society. It is to offer things that we consume. And you can see even the debate, you see whether it's BBI or any debate is about the things we are offering to you, yeah, so that you reach this level. I believe that if we have to attain the peace that we are talking about, we must see the leadership as part and parcel of the society, that the government must be embedded in the society, that the thing they say and they do are those things that reflect the aspirations of the society. not to be seen, not as a society, as a consumer, consuming what the government is giving. And we look at them as opportunities, that Mugai will be given a job here, this one will be given a job. The government is there to give a job or to give opportunities. The government is not there to give opportunities. It is just needed to harness the energies of the people so that the people can reach this final image they have all agreed together. Yeah. So there is that disconnect, and that is why we have had a big challenge on governance. And it is a reason you find that the governance mainly is managed in the area of myth. That if you do this, there will be danger. I don't know whether you have read the book of The African Child. You are told when you go in the dark. And when we were learning about the orgies. You know, you learn that if you do this, there will be danger ahead of you. And the danger you don't know, it is going to be a big animal, something with several mouths, big ears. So you run, the governance is run on those bases, as I said, on the basis of myth. So I hope that we may be able to break out of this. And the first thing is to see the whole image as a people of where we want to go, and therefore everybody contributes to this, and we march progressively to that place. So Wangari really talked about the issue of concept of sustainable development. And she said you cannot have, and she gave the concept of the stool. You must have peace, you must have good environmental management, you must have good governance to have sustainable development. If you don't have those three stones, you cannot have sustainable development. So that is the leakage that she gave on this matter. That if people, the environment is bad, is disrupted, they cannot have peace. And that's why she went all the way to protect Uhuru Park, where you can have good environment and people can go and enjoy there on a Saturday afternoon, on a Sunday afternoon, and have peace, enjoy their peace there. That when you don't have peace, the first thing that is disrupted is the environment. And you have seen where you have problems like Somalia, where people are burning charcoal, or where everything. Yeah. The environment is the first culprit when you don't have good peace. And in the long run, there is no sustainable development. Because if you cut all those trees, where are you going to cut more tomorrow when you clear them? Yeah. So there's no plan. And whatever you plant, other people come and cut it. The way you share water to an extent that the people downstream cannot enjoy it when there is no peace. Otherwise, you beat them up. So she did that linkage of the issue of peace, good governance, environment, that all lead to a sustainable development. I hope I have responded to your question, Dr. Guta. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Dr. Guta, you are okay?
Yes, please. Thank you. I am okay. But with your permission, can my Vice-Chancellor comment on the current status in regard to carbon budget depletion vis-a-vis the environmental conservation? Where are we heading to? Thank you.
Maybe we allow the experts that are in the panel, Professor Mugai, now to respond on that one. I think that all of us would benefit.
I think that is work in progress, Dr. Nguta. It's one of the reasons why the government has the 10%, afforestation, planting trees on 10% of Kenya's land area, and which is being cascaded to institutions, even at the university level. We are expected to contribute to that. Of course, there are also other measures that the government has put in place in terms of looking at what we call sustainable production and consumption. For instance, emissions from different sources. We have given our targets on how much we want to reduce each of the greenhouse gases. So efforts are taking place with regards to limiting the emissions, and which obviously will lead into less global warming, and therefore trying to get to good grip with climate change. Is that okay, Dr. Nguto?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Thank you. Great.
Thank you. Any question from anybody? I can see this is more of a comment from Principal CAVS, Professor Nikal. She says that we can all contribute to humanity if we have the will and the passion, which indeed we could cultivate. So that is more of a comment, I think, to all of us and to the Institute to cultivate those values. Good. Any other question?
But maybe to our panelists, how can we really conserve our environment at such a time when the population, global population is growing at an alarming rate? These people need space.
Yes. So you're asking the speaker, the main speaker?
Yeah, the panelists. The panelists.
Oh, the panelists, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I can respond a little bit.
Yes,
to
Professor.
that.
Yes.
The first thing is, of course, those people who are on top and are able to see, to have a holistic picture. Although it is true that global population is growing at an alarming rate, actually it's not everywhere in the globe. In Africa, the population is truly growing very fast, but in Europe, in many parts, the population is going down. If you have that global picture, you can see what is likely to happen. Let's talk specifically about use of natural resources in the world. Because under the phase of industrial revolution, countries in Africa were seen as sources of raw materials. Up to today, most of the world is still seeing Africa as a source of raw material. That's why there is this great expansion by our latest global power, China, in exploiting Africa in a guise of helping, because we have the natural resources that are untapped. But if you look clearly at the world, you will see that as a country develops, people congregate together in cities. Ability to live in cities is a hallmark of civilization. And therefore, land is left open for food production, which is the major concern as we industrialize. My view is that we who will be responsible for planning for the future of Africa, and specifically for us in Kenya, planning for the future of Kenya, we will realize the need to actually concentrate people into urban centers and leave the land open for food production. It will also involve more environmental friendly food production strategies. And in industrialization, in manufacturing, for example, we will insist on appropriate methods for reduction of environmental degradation. This is something that is already in our laws. We don't need to create new laws, but it's something that we can do as we plan for the future. At the moment, I think that we are not yet at an alarming stage in terms of the population. If, like the Vice-Chancellor has said, if the people who are in government embrace the future, look forward and see it, the future for us, not for themselves as individuals, but the future for a nation, and start planning for the nation rather than planning for individuals.
Thank you, Wahome. Can I, Mr. Chairman, just add one little thing?
Yes.
I understand the concern that is being raised here with connection with a growing population. But if you actually looked at the mass of land that we have, even here in this country alone, and the population that we have, it is actually the use of the land that is at fault. It is not lack of land. If we were able to produce 10 bags of maize in half an acre, which is possible, why would someone be producing or taking land that is 100 acres only to produce 50 bags of maize? You see, it's the use of land that is more problematic. So we need to bring people together, identify, like Professor Wahome has said, where do we live and where do we farm? Because majority of our people are using unproductive land to grow what cannot be grown, and we call them poor people. But, and then someone else has rich land which uses to build a house on instead of producing food and other materials that we need. When Prof was alive, she encouraged the government at that time, and in particular, the First Lady, Madam Mrs. Kibaki, to establish 7 villages in Narumoru, which I think Professor Wahome has also alluded to. And in these villages, everybody was to live in a village. You are given in a village, and the rest of the land is given to you outside there, so that you can congregate, you can aggregate that land and farm wheat, you can aggregate that land and produce something, but you then can be serviced. You can be given water, you can be given healthcare services, the school can be near you, but you can as well also have land that you grow your food on. And I think that's an experiment that should be looked at again and see whether it actually works. Then why can't we replicate it somewhere else?
Thank you very much, Professor Karanja. Population is not the problem. It is the use of the resources that we have. It's a good topic for discussion in my class on Monday evening.
Good.
Okay, now, thank you. There is a question here from Michael Wawero, and he says that, and he's specifically asking the VC, but I think members of the panelists can also jump in, that from the vision that Professor Maathai had of inbuilt and homegrown solutions, what are some of the strategies to reduce bright minds that brackets that creates the nexus between community and policy implementation, close the bracket, leaving immediately after they land, leaving communities and not remaining to solve the same problems that push them to studying further. So what are the strategies to keep these people on the job for which they have been trained? I think that is if I can rephrase the question. Maybe we can start with Professor Kiama, and then the other panelists can also go at it.
I think that is a question, actually, it's a serious question on sustainable development. You go to the countryside, to the villages, people left, and the population there is aging. I believe that the devolution may provide the long-term solution that we need to retain our people in the different parts of the country, rather than everybody leaving and coming to Nairobi and the other places. Because the young people need to ensure that they are empowered. So they cannot just stay there to provide solution to those people, but then they cannot be able to make ends meet. So the issue of ensuring that the money also is circulating in the rural areas, that the young people can also get some means of livelihood as they solve these problems, is important. And the long term, the sustainable solution is what we have done, the devolution. And I hope that the devolution will not go only up to the county level. It will go substantively up to sub-county level, so that the resources go closer and closer to the people, and the people now begin to generate resources. And we come out of this system where the government is a layer on top of the people, but it penetrates the communities, and that these young people are embedded in there in offering solutions, and they feel like they are appreciated as they offer solution in terms of being able also to meet their own livelihood. That's my contribution to that.
Thank you very much, BC. Any of the panelists?
Yes, Prof.
Yes,
May
yes.
I add a few words on to what the Vice-Chancellor has said? I was going to praise the idea of devolution as one way of ensuring resources are generated, utilized appropriately in the rural areas. But there is also an additional thing, and this concerns us as universities, in training people. We train them where they are needed. There is a huge brain drain in Africa. This brain drain is manifested in several ways, not just people going out of the country to work in Australia or Canada, which they are doing, but also in people trained as veterinarians who eventually work as brewers, or people trained in agriculture who end up as insurance salesmen, or people who are trained as engineers who actually end up as accountants. This is a kind of brain drain which basically shows that we are not training people for the competencies that are required in the industry. There is need for us to constantly be aware that the job market is changing and adapt our curricula to meet the needs that exist. And we can do this by regular consultations with the communities, which is an idea that Professor Wangari Maathai had, consultations with the communities to properly determine what the need is really, and therefore tailor-make training to meet those needs. And thus we can avoid brain drain. This is just in addition to what the Vice-Chancellor has said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wahome. Professor Karanja, do you have a comment, or Marion, on that?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Marion, I think, Rob, yeah. Marion, you want to comment on that? Okay, now let me go to one comment. I think I'll need to wind up the webinar now. We've been on it for quite some time. But there is one question by, okay, just give me a second. Yes, one comment by, okay, there is Karin Selina. And she's saying that awareness on environmental conservation matters is not well articulated in this country, though we have set institutions, even at the county level, to check on environmental matters. We have seen people refusing to leave protected forests, and even politicians behaving as if they don't know the impacts that that action would cause not only to our country, but also to the world at large. Does the Institute have any collaboration with the government for championing this environmental conservation? Now,
that's yours, Prof.
Yes, the Institute has several collaborations with different stakeholders. For instance, I thought it is very clear the Green Belt movement, we work very closely with them. We are also working very closely with the Minister of Environment and Forestry. We are working closely with the Kenya Water Towers Agency. We have very strong links and carry out joint activities with Kenya Forestry Service and also the Kenya Forestry Research Institute. We are also working with the counties, for instance, Kiambu County, Tharaka Nithi County, in various environmental aspects, including forest conservation. So the answer is yes, we are doing that and we are expanding those links. You heard Professor Wahome talk about the STAKE project, where we trained 2 PhD students on forest-related conflicts in the area. So our research findings have been disseminated both through peer-reviewed publications, but also through meetings with those with the people in the Kenya Forest Service. So the answer is yes. There was a question by somebody, Hesbon. I don't know whether Hesbon, are you still in the meeting? Maybe he left. The question has disappeared from, it was in Q&A, and he was basically asking what are your thoughts on environmental conservation. I wrote back to him and I asked him to indicate the context in which he's asking that question, but I don't know whether the panelists, whether you'd like to respond to that, your thoughts, your take on environmental conservation.
Let me say something, when a moderator, on environmental conservation.
Yes, please.
There are 3 areas that we consider very important in environmental conservation. One is environmental governance, ensuring that our natural resources or natural landscapes, our soils, our waters, our forests are protected with a governance structure that protects them rather than exposes them for degradation and destruction. The other arm is the environmental rights and responsibilities. And those rights, because our environment is your right. It's your right to breathe good, fresh air. It's your right to have access to fuel wood. It's your right to enjoy a forest landscape, your right to water, right to good soils in your farm and so on. Those rights have responsibilities. And we therefore must encourage people, the communities, the landowners, all stakeholders, plus the governments, to ensure that you have the right laws that acknowledge your rights to using them, but also requires you to do your duty in protecting them. And the final angle to me is in the manner of sustainability of our resources, that we make sure that we are not depleting our resources to the extent that they become extinct, that our forests are self-serving, and that even when we harvest trees, we are able to replenish them or replace them with new seedlings, so that there is continuity of the services we get from such environments. Our landscapes are full of teeming with various environmental assets, and those necessitate a sustainable means by which we utilize them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Karanja. Any other input from the panelists?
Yes, in terms of research, because this is something that we need to talk about, Professor Wangari, like the Vice-Chancellor said, had a vision of an institute that was heavily involved in research. And most of the funding agencies nowadays, when they are funding research in natural sciences and agriculture, demand that you demonstrate how your results will contribute to climate change or global warming, how it will reduce greenhouse gases, how it will involve people and change them, transform them, so that they become custodians of the environment, and how you will involve gender, because women are more caring by nature, men are more exploitative by nature, and in a state where women are less involved, exploitation tends to be the rule, and we need to encourage gender participation in research and in the utilization of research results. So this is a requirement almost from where I sit and see in all newly funded projects. And it's something that we should aspire to do, even in our master's degree and PhD degree research projects, to incorporate those issues of environmental protection and involvement and inclusiveness as we conduct the research. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wahome. Maybe something that I should have mentioned in respect to the previous question is that the Institute has a peace laboratory specifically for mediation training and carrying out mediation sessions with different parties who may be in conflict over resources. Vice-Chancellor, you have a comment or? Okay, thank you. I think we have done good justice to the presentations. We have had, good questions and good responses, and therefore I want to bring to an end our webinar this afternoon. And I'd like to request the Deputy Director, Wangari Maathai Institute, Professor John Muthama, to give a vote of thanks. Professor Muthama.
Thank you, Professor Mungai. I would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to our Vice-Chancellor for the inspirational, moving, and insightful reflections that will go a long way in helping the audience to chart a way forward, be it in action, intellectual, and otherwise. We also are grateful to our principal, Professor Rose Nyikal, for hosting this, this webinar. We are grateful also to the panelists, Madam Marion Kamau, Professor Wahome, and Professor Karanja, for very engaging and very informative thoughts that have been shared. Thanks to our director, Professor David Mungai, for the excellent moderation. We are grateful also to our distinguished audience. You spared your time to come and participate in this, this very useful webinar. I'm also grateful. We would also want to express our gratitude to our ICT team and the corporate office for making this webinar a success, including also the WMI staff who were involved in the background work to this. And finally, we want to thank our Almighty God for granting us this opportunity to even enjoy the reflections of such a rich heritage that we can draw so much from. I believe, especially the student community, this is a rich ground for you to come up with very innovative ideas for your research as we move forward. On that note, I want to say thank you to all of us, and the Lord bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Muthama. Goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Principal.
Bye-bye.
Okay.